You've tuned in to The Self Leader, a Peoplepreneur podcast. I'm Anks, founder, host, and self-leadership coach. Get ready to forge your path forward. What awaits is an extraordinary existence, all of which is possible through your personal leadership. What if you were the reason for the change? Imagine the legacy you leave behind. The world needs you more than ever. There's a peoplepreneur in you. And so it's time to take the lead. Your self-leadership begins right now. Welcome to officially Peoplepreneur. Welcome to the podcast. Anks here. If we haven't met, it's a pleasure. I just want to start by saying thank you for sharing a moment of your time with us. And really, for me, you investing a moment of your time for your self-leadership, something that is come through to me and through and into my life, and how we envision Peoplepreneur to be built in the coming years. And so for me, this podcast has been a long time coming. I've been dealing with my own certain challenges, but this is it. This is we're doing it. So officially welcome. Thank you. What were we going to talk about? This first episode was perhaps the hardest part, because there's so many things we can talk about. And what was important here was really what we're trying to do, and self-leadership is top of that list. And so in this episode, it's more about me investing a moment of my time to get you to encourage you really to start thinking about the self-leader mind and what that is. And what that is really in sort of a short form. Now, there's many things that I can go into right now, but if I was to give you, let's say, between 5 and 7 aspects of really what I believe the self-leader mind consists of, then here it is. So let's say number 1, awareness. Now, there's a lot of talk about self-awareness. And it is self-awareness that I'm talking about, but more so specifically awareness, where it's not the narrative that we hear today when they say, well, do you know who you are? Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? That is part of it, but not the complete set. This is more about examples where are we aware of why I feel angry today? Or are we aware of what is the other person that I'm having a conversation with actually telling me? Or it could be, am I aware of what I can control in this environment that seems uncontrollable? That is what I believe self-awareness is. Number 2, clarity. Now, there is a lot of talk about clarity as well. And what you'll find here with me is sometimes I don't like to share perspectives that, first of all, I haven't adopted and understood myself. So when I talk about clarity is not just about how clear things are. What I'm actually talking about when I say clarity is, can we form a connection to ourselves, self-connection? And through that connection, things become a lot more clearer. Number 3, resilience. So resilience is important because are we able to withstand the challenges that are inevitable in everyone's journey? And how well we can be resilient in adversity as well as successes. Number 4, inner resourcefulness, meaning we're all given the same toolbox. We all have the same toolbox. We all have the tools. Nobody in the world has more tools than anybody else. Yet we embrace each tool with our own understanding. Over time, we master those tools very much differently in our journeys than each other. And so how can we best utilize those inner resources that we have to become more effective? Number 5, which I think this is quite an important one, autonomy and accountability. Are we actually in control of our own lives? Or is there a narrative there that is just so subtle that we are unaware of it, that somebody else is controlling our lives? Because when we can't control our mind, then we allow other people the control over our lives. Accountability there is really important. How accountable are we in, not just to ourselves, but to others through our experiences? It's quite a big one. Number 6. Now, I'm going to use this word as a means to communicate with you what I'm talking about. And the word is authenticity. Now, as much as I don't like that word, because there's certain connotations which doesn't really work for me, and it's a perspective I'll share eventually in due course. What I'm talking about when I talk about authenticity is I'm talking about congruency. How congruent are we to who we are in everything we do and the people we speak to, how we experience life, what we do, how we go about doing it? There has to be a level of congruency in that. And then probably the last one, number 7, growth is part of it, but what I'm going to say is intentionality. A lot of people these days they say, oh, well, I'm trying to be intentional. But what I find is there is no criteria to that intention. And if there is, they don't know it. And so these are these like sort of a core 7 areas that I'm consistently thinking about when it comes to this self-leader mind. Now, this is, we're talking about self-leader here. So this is leadership talk, but this is not external leadership. In today's world, the vast world of leadership, there's a lot of talk about teams, cultures, and leading people, and that has its place. Often I find the missing piece is there's a lack of self-leadership. Because when there's a lack of self-leadership, then we are founded on misleadership, because we're externally driven. We listen from the out towards in when it should be the in towards out. So, for example, we could be in a business setting right now, and we have leaders in corporate places and business places, or you're some sort of a position for a company. That's all great and it has its place. But if we aren't self-led, then are we in the right place? Are we leading the right people for the right reasons, in the right cause? A lot of things in that respect are secondary to a lot of people, and it needs to be primary. And so what this is more an internal shift to how we start leading. It's the foundational, what I call the sort of the inner mastery, where we're able to start mastering the inner aspects of leadership. Now, you know what? Leadership isn't new. This is not something new I'm creating. It's already in circulation. It's name dropped many places. Many people are doing it. And I believe it originated with a gentleman called Charles C. Manns. I believe that I pronounced that right. It was coined during sort of the mid-1980s. And he was a distinguished scholar in organizational behavior and He was sort of renowned for his extensive research on leadership and teams and working environments and self-leadership. Since him, there's been much sort of academic research around self-leadership. But what I find is it's more focused on sort of the cognitive, the behavioral, the reward strategies, and it mostly has a certain task or a goal in mind for that. Now, if we were to define it, now I'm not creating a new definition. You probably find online there's a definition out there, but self-leadership is more about the process where individuals influence and guide themselves to achieve self-direction, self-motivation for a particular goal or a task that they're trying to achieve. And now I'm not really trying to redefine that. There's a lot of truth to that. What I want to encourage you to think about when it comes to self-leadership is we're looking at this from a very holistic point of view, from the top level. And from that top level, it's more so about that there is no real linear path. There is no one framework for complete self-leadership. It's like going to the gym. There's a lot of exercises, there's a lot of strategies, there's a lot of ways to achieve the result, but there's no one particular way. And so here at Peoplepreneur, what we're trying to do is through this holistic approach is we're trying to look at how can we consistently progress. Think about growth for a second. Growth really doesn't have no end, right? There is no end point to growth. There might be milestones, but there is no end. And so really what we're trying to work towards through self-leadership is how can we become more effective in particular areas in our life. So here's how I want you to start thinking about what we're building here in Peoplepreneur is think of self-leadership as the top level umbrella, right? The top word. And if we were to open up that top word, outpours several areas which we are, let's say, categorizing under different aspects. So, for example, when you open up that self-leadership, we get self-navigation, self-awareness, self-love, self-expression, self-valuation, self-empowerment, and lastly, self-care. Now, this is not a strict list. This is more so a starting point where a lot of the things that we as people, as humans need in terms of development can be housed under these categorizations. And so each category serves as what I call a pathway for growth, if you will. Right? Depending on where you are on your journey, you have a different requirement. You have a different starting point for where you're trying to self-lead. So, for example, someone who is trying to become a public speaker, for example, the pathway of growth, he would be more attuned to self-expression as a category, where he would find most of the material that he needs for improving that sense of communication. And so I'm trying to house them under these sort of categorizations. Now, depending on where you are in your growth, now, if we're talking about journey, I just want to share with you really how I've stumbled upon self-leadership. And that comes from a humble journey of mine where homelessness was a big player in my life. I've met many people, and a good friend of mine once said to me that you have a wealth of perspective. And after contemplating on that and sort of bundling that up with many other views and opinions that people placed on what I shared with them, it was all under this idea of perspective. Now, where did that perspective come from? I can tell you that I was grounded very early on. And what I mean by grounded was there was a lot of hardship as my life progressed from when I was younger, which I'll just share with you briefly. The date I can remember, 29th August 2006, is when me and my family, we packed up our belongings, our things. We lived in a town here in UK called Cambridge, and we had a shop, a convenience store, and things weren't working. Life was, up until this point, still very challenging for us. Not enough money to pay rent, and struggling to make ends meet and pay bills, often eating as a family the bare minimum. But at the time, I believe I was 18 years old. We decided as a family to sell up, and my mum and dad would head off to the States to see if we can create a better life there. And while I was at university, my sister was at university here as well, we decided to split. So we had no home to go to. I remember I was driving them to the airport when all was said and done. I don't know, there was a sense of excitement there because I was young. There was excitement in terms of independence, but knowing that I could be a great contributor to improving the life that we haven't yet achieved. And so what started with excitement, now in hindsight, ended with embarrassment. So I dropped them off and I'm driving back to university. Over the coming months to now, it turned into years, life had different plans. And so what started off with a sense of homelessness, what settled was there came a point in my life where I actually became homeless. So it's not the kind of homeless person on the streets. I don't know. For me, I couldn't settle myself to see myself in that way. So it's when I say homeless, I don't mean I was just sitting on the streets and waiting for someone to throw some change in my cup. I would be getting up and doing something about it, but I had no home to go to. And as you can imagine, yes, debts were high. I had loads of debts. And oftentimes there would be debt collectors who are knocking on the door. Just to give you a perspective and sort of context here, I was paying, in terms of UK currency, £10 to 10 debtors through a mediator company. So that was £1 per month, covering £10 for 10 debtors. And so it was really hard to overcome the certain debt that I had built up. It would progress longer than expected because I'm paying so little. Oftentimes there would be limited food, right? I remember times where I had a tin of fish to eat for the whole day. I couldn't afford it. I had no money. All the work that I would be working in would be all allocated already, right? So I don't know if you've ever been there, but when you're allocating funds that are coming in for next month, that's how bad the situation was. I didn't ever even see it. But one thing I learned, which was great in this sort of adverse period of mine, was that opinions came like a dime a dozen. If you've heard that term, dime a dozen. A dime is like, I believe it's 10 cents. A dime is like 10 pence here in the UK, 10 cents in the States. So opinions came like a dime a dozen, right? You reach into your pocket and you pull out a change and there's a bunch of dimes in there. What you're looking for is dollars, the £1, the bigger currency. And it's funny because what I found was I found a lot of dozen opinions, but there was no dime in those opinions. It was very shallow. It's what I call shallow empathy. Not shallow empathy. I call it empty empathy. There were a lot of talkers, people that talk a good game. In your time of struggle, that is when you really see people for who they are. And so there were many talkers that showed empty empathy. And there weren't many much doers, people that actually say, hey, listen, let me actually help you. Here's what I can do. And so that was a hard lesson. And that lesson gave me the understanding that really nobody is coming to save you. And yet, yeah, you know what, it sounds a bit dramatic, but it's true. We are here to pick up ourselves and do the things that we need to do in order to get the things done. And so what I came to understand is that nobody had the answer to such a unique construction of our lives. It's like, you know, if you look at our fingerprints, they're so unique. Each fingerprint is unique in your own 5 fingers, let alone to somebody else's hand. And so that uniqueness, that curves, you know, the patterns on there, that's how unique life is. And I came to a realization that because nobody's here to help me, or even when opinions came a dime a dozen, often I found that even trying them, following them, still never worked. So in that struggle, in that period of real homelessness, and for probably a good 5 to 6 months, I was actually homeless. I found meaning during that time, and that meaning was me. I found me. I was able to understand really who I am, right? What were my capabilities? I learned to manage my mind more. But, you know, don't get me wrong, there were times where I fell short, right? I was a lot reactive to the environment. Growing up, the one thing I learned as a family, we always used to run. Escape is the word that I use today. Escape. When the going gets tough, we escape, we run, we shift, we avoid, we divert. And this time really taught me to stand up, because enough was enough from running. And it taught me to stand, fight. But in that, I also lost friends, because money was the biggest lack in my life at the time. And if you're not careful, because of it, you lose friends. And I did. I've lost a few friends because of it. A couple of things that I started to understand, though, I understand people a little bit better, right? I understand, you know, their actions, what they do, their behavior. And then, you know what? I found the real deals, the people, you know, the doers, true people that saw you for you, not for what you had, or how wealthy you are, or how famous you are, or how many likes you got in social media. I met my wife, who is today my wife. It was my girlfriend back at the time, Krishma. I met her. I was humbled, right? Her ability to see, you know, I'm going to use the term diamond in the dirt, right? So she saw something in me that I thought nobody could. And so what I've come to realize, and I want to share with you here, is that even in all my struggles, and this is how kind of sort of self-leadership came to me, and where I knew that I had to be the most in control in my life. Often, if you're a believer of the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, the only way for you to truly connect, and what I mean by connect is to sort of self-connect and see beyond more than what people show, or what you can read in a book, or you can gain from watching a video or an educational video, is for you to truly understand the truth. Well, life has to remove the distractions. And often those distractions are there in the way, filtering our perception. So distractions like, you know, how much money we're making, what car we're driving, how great we look with designer outfits on, how much money is in my pocket. All of these kind of distractions that keep us at bay. And I like to call it like our antenna, our human antenna. Often our human antenna isn't high enough for us to truly understand the signals. So what life has to do is has to remove all those distractions from us, so that we are able to hoist that antenna up and begin to communicate, and through synchronicity and life, to gain the real answers. We start asking the right questions. And so where I am today, you understand that the Peoplepreneur is here. So where that is today is through that personal journey of mine. Now that I've begun to understand people better, I'm trying to house it into Peoplepreneur. Because what we're trying to really ultimately think about here when we're talking about self-leader and that mindset is how effective we can be. And you know what? I've been there through that transition, through that time. I climbed the ladder, whatever that ladder is in terms of working environment, corporate, whatever you want to call it. I've been in the managerial position. So I've been base level position into managerial area manager. I've led managers and I've worked with business owners. And through that journey, I still found that there was something missing because I'm an observer. And it's a good quality to have, to shut our mouth and listen more with our ears and see and observe. And something was missing. And I always saw that there are some people that truly excelled and some that continuously kept falling, failing, or fell short. And in that long process, I came to that term, self-leadership, because it doesn't matter how great things got. The ultimate thing that really defined momentarily, day by day, was how great we were leading ourselves. So this is where Peoplepreneur comes in. The thing is, we cannot lead anyone, lead anything, until we can learn to influence and lead ourselves. Oftentimes we're unable to listen to our own gut or intuition or know that one thing is right for us better than the other. But the thing that we're supposed to be listening to isn't popular. It isn't something that the world likes. It might not be trending. And so oftentimes we dismiss those signals, and we become, as a result, we can become very solutions orientated. We become a solution seeker, right? So we're constantly, when we're struggling, we're constantly finding a solution. How do I get out of this? What is the problem? Now, that sounds like it's a good thing to do, right? To find a solution, sure. But what's better is, how do we become a problem solver? And that is ultimately what self-leading is we're constantly firefighting our own existence. We're constantly managing ourselves. So, for example, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. Today, often when someone is looking for a job, the criteria for a job boils down ultimately to how much you're getting paid. Because who wants to work for someone and you're not getting paid what you think you should be getting paid, or it's just not enough? Well, that is a situation, and the criteria really for that situation, whereas it's incorrect. We're working for the wrong thing. It's the quick win. It's the, how can I be comfortable right now? It's the solution seeking mindset. They subdue, people subdue to these types of thoughts, short-term wins, in order to survive. Now, what Peoplepreneur and what we're trying to build here is this sort of daily development of a craft called you. It's that development of you. It's that management, that self-leadership of you on a daily basis. Because each and every human experience is a momentary existence. And it's in those momentary existence that makes us truly effective, right? So Peoplepreneur, in that process, in that journey, when I was homeless and up until today, that came to me intuitively when I was out on one of my walks. And it really stuck with me because I was connected to it. Why? Because the focus was correct. I wasn't running after something that was material, that had ultimately an end to its use, to its application. And so the focus of how I came up with the word peoplepreneur, it came to me because the focus was more about people, something that is like growth, a continuous thing, the thing that is ultimately going to fulfill us and sustain us. And I define peoplepreneur as an individual who, through their self-leadership, actively invest their resources for the betterment of humanity. They're the people that know there's more to life, and their effectiveness lies in how well somebody else benefits. And so it's what I'm building there is an aspiration for the disconnected world we live in. It's a path of alignment, fulfillment, contribution, and service. But, don't get me wrong, that pursuit, there may also be material wins in the process. great experiences, great relationships, fun. Whereas it's not just the primary focus. Those things aren't the end goal. They are the things, the softening, fluffy things throughout the journey that keep us going on that same path, on that aligned path. So just imagine for a second what complete confidence in yourself feels like. And what I mean by that is imagine anything you're doing, anything you're going through, that you have a certain complete sense of certitude, self-certitude. Just imagine for a second, without a shadow of doubt, that you could make it through anything because of the way you self-lead, because of the way you manage your mind, because of the way you orchestrate your life and your existence. What if you no longer require somebody, something, to inadvertently or subtly or indirectly or directly lead the way you're supposed to be leading your life? Imagine that. Imagine you had that complete control. Imagine what choosing a job would be like, or which business to start, what product to sell, that was in alignment with your path, rather than starting a new path, a branch which has no coherence to the path. So everything is connected, right? Intentional and self-guided. Because you know what? I don't know about you, but it's easier to be accountable or to own up to a mistake, an error, or something you've done wrong when you've decided that it was the way to do it, it didn't work, and it's easier to sort of self-manage and self-lead your way out of it, to be accountable for it, rather than doing something that somebody else told you to do, or you're following a path of somebody else, and then you have to rely on a sense of accountability, which first of all didn't start with accountability in the first place. And so you've heard of the term, right? It's difficult to be someone else and live their life. Well, in actual fact, let's flip that. I think it's actually easier. And if you want an easy life, then literally just follow the people out there. It's easy. Just do what they do, say what they say, try what they do, just copy them, and then hope for something to work. Because friends, listen, the real work isn't copying them, because not everything is going to work. The real work is in leading yourself, because there is no path that is paved. And oftentimes we are trying to look for a already existing path. Those people that are truly led, those that we truly are on the top level influential scale, they never followed a path that was predefined. They made the path. And self-leadership really is about, first of all, leading your path, but you're bricking it as you are walking it, so that really others can follow the path. Now, as I come to this close and I think about self-leadership and really want what this podcast is really going to mean, I want you to, at least from this episode, to marinate on the self-leader mind. Just remember that growth has no end. So if it has no end, if there's no boundary to how much you grow, then you can begin from where you are. You can begin anywhere. Self-leadership starts now, starts today. So one of the things, a couple of things I actually want you to think about is how autonomous are you in your life? Who's leading it? And it can be subtle. I want you to think about it. Are we following other people's path? Are we leading on somebody else's word? Is somebody else deciding for us? How in control are you? How connected are you to yourself? Truly. Because those that are truly connected know exactly where they're going, what they're doing, the next 5 steps. They have that sense of certitude, right? Think about your inner resources. How empowered are you with the tools that you already have? Or the tools that already you can use? Are you living congruently? Or are you a different person with different people and different scenarios, and at work and at home? Are you a completely different person? And where do you base your intentionality from? If the path that you're treading on or you're making doesn't give you intention, then where is that intention coming from? Thanks for listening. You've tuned in to the Self Leader Podcast. Follow us, rate and review our episodes, because together we can build a more connected and fulfilled world. Anks here. Until we meet again, self-lead or inevitably be misled.